All right, so this knife thoughts video is going to be about this knife, the Spyderco SpydieChef. And this is going to be a relatively quick video, a little bit more of a first impressions overview than a true review because as you'll see here, this knife turned out to not be, quite for me. So I haven't used this knife, but I wanted to make a video anyway, just to give you, like I said, my first impressions and some of the things that I liked, and then the reasons why I don't plan to keep this knife. So this is the, again, Spyderco SpydieChef. It's another knife designed by Marcin Schliess. I always have a whole lot of trouble pronouncing that name, but you can look up Marcin Schliess or just look this knife up and you'll be able to find his name and his other work. And speaking of his other work, he's done several different knives for Spyderco, including the Techno and Techno 2 and the super popular the Schliess Bowie, and then recently the Schliess Swayback. So a lot of different designs, and people really like them, and they all have some similarities. First of all, they're all titanium frame locks. They all have this wire clip, and they have a design similarity that I'll talk about in a second. But like I said, this is a titanium frame lock, all titanium on the handles, coated screws, and even a titanium wire clip here. And the reason for that is because, as the name suggests, this knife is intended to be used as a folding chef or cooking knife, food prep knife. And so it has ultra rust resistant LC200N steel, which I haven't had a chance to try yet. I was hoping to on this knife, but like I said, I haven't used it yet. But I've heard a lot of good things about the LC200N. It seems to, or sounds like it has higher edge retention than H1 steel that Spyderco uses on other salt knives, but still super high corrosion resistance. So it has that, and then it has the titanium handle and clip, which won't, corrode at all, and then the coated screws. So it is a knife intended to, be used in the water and around, acidic things, doing food prep and things like that. And that's a big part of what made me decide to try this knife. I actually intended to get this knife as a camping and water knife. So to use it, I do, some camping trips where you float down the river in a canoe or raft or whatever, and it's good to have a knife that's corrosion resistant. I often carry my user Endura, but it does sometimes get some rust flecks on it when I have it in the water, for a full long weekend or something like that. And then also just because you tend to do a lot of food prep when you're at camp, and sometimes when you're camping, and sometimes you don't want to use a big knife or don't have a good kitchen knife with you. So that's what I intended this knife for, as a camping slash canoeing, kayaking, water, knife, and then as a camp food prep knife. And I was really looking forward to it because I was able to get this knife for a pretty good price because of a kind of unannounced flash type sale that was done by Blade HQ through Amazon, and it was on Prime Day, so I don't know if it was because of that, but it wasn't actually technically a Prime Day deal, I don't think, but they had some knives on sale. So I was able to get it for a good price, and there are some things that I like about this knife. First of all, I like the handle. It looks really good. The way they finish these titanium handles is really nice. It has kind of a subtle bead blast that just looks good, I think. It also seems to be machined really well. It is pretty smooth. It's a little bit, it did get a little bit smoother after opening it a few times. At first, it didn't feel ultra smooth, to be honest. I put a little bit of oil in the pivot, and now it's nice and smooth. I would say it feels similar to how, a Sebenza or something like that would feel. So I do like the action. It does lock up solidly. I'll talk about the lockup a little bit more in a second, but you can see it's at like 80-ish% So pretty solid lockup. I don't mind, you know, a lockup that goes pretty far across like that. I think it's a good thing generally, as long as the lockup is good. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. But it has really nice centering. It seams well ground. It seems really thinly ground. I don't know how well you can see that there, but it seems like it's a really nice thin grind behind the edge. And I generally like the design. It's kind of a modified sheep foot with, instead of a straight edge, a really good amount of continuous belly and then a blunted tip, which is, it's similar to like, again, a modified sheep foot or a modified Santoku type blade. And the handle actually feels pretty good too. It has a little guard to keep your fingers from riding forward while you're using it, and generally feels good in, you know, a hammer type, I guess this is a hammer or whatever, this type grip, and in a pinch grip, which is probably more how you would use it if you were using it for food prep. So I do like the handle. I like how it feels, and I like how it looks, like I said, and the blade is a nice design. I also really like the clip. I'm a fan of the wire clip that Spyderco does in general, and I think that this titanium version of it looks good, and I think it would work really well. It seems to have good retention and everything like that. But there are some things that I don't like about this knife, and some reasons why I'm not going to keep it. First of all, even though I got it for a good deal, it's still an expensive knife for me. I don't buy a whole lot of knives in this price range, and it takes liking it a lot to keep it. But the reasons why I don't love the knife are, first and probably less importantly, I don't like how Marcin Schlisch, again, if I'm pronouncing that right, which I'm sure I'm not, does the opening to get at the spider hole. First of all, because of at least this and the swayback design, which I do have a video of and you can check out, I'll put the link in the description, but it had the same issue where, because of the design, the spider hole here is not relatively very big. So it's not too much smaller, but a little bit smaller than on the Police 4 Lightweight, which I really like. Comparing it to a Domino, I'm going to talk about some other comparisons here. I believe the Domino spider hole is also bigger. And then another one, I just have these out because I'm going to talk about, like I said, another aspect. I think the Chalkways is also a little bigger. So it's a relatively small spider hole. Not that you can't get at it, but it's kind of exacerbated by the way that he does this cutout. And I really am not a huge fan of it. It's pretty much tracks right with the radius of the hole, and what that does is it just makes it so it's kind of hard to get down in there. Now, I certainly have wide, you know, thick, kind of chubby thumbs for sure. So if you don't, it might be easier for you to get down into that. But I have felt pretty much on all of the knives designed by Marcin Schlisch that it's just a little bit frustrating and unnecessarily difficult to get down into there. Again, this isn't meant to be a super tactical knife. It's meant more for kitchen duty, and that's probably not a huge deal that it takes an extra second or a little bit of a different grip to get down into that hole. But for me, being that I wanted to use this as a river knife or a water knife, it does matter. I do want to be able to get to the opening method and get it open really quickly and consistently in case I did have to use it, you know, in an emergency on the water. So I'm really not a big fan of how he does the design to open to allow access to the spider hole. And the other thing here is that it makes it pretty much not ambidextrous. So not that, you know, I'm right-handed, not that I have to open a knife with my left hand very often, but if I needed to, I pretty much couldn't do it. You just can't get at it. So I'm really not a huge fan of how this is done on his knives, on knives designed by Marcin Schlisch. And that's one thing that I didn't like. The other thing, and probably the more important thing to me, is the fact that it's a titanium frame lock without a lock insert. Now, I have had titanium frame locks without lock inserts that didn't develop blade play, but I haven't kept any for super long to kind of test that theory. Most, if not, I believe all of my titanium frame locks that are long-time users, other than one that I'll show here, have a lock bar insert. And what that does is the lock bar insert can be hardened to the same hardness as the blade. That way they just interface and they don't stick. But because the titanium is always going to be softer than the blade, it tends to stick. And this knife, I've opened this knife maybe 30 times, 20, 30, something like that. And that even 20 might be high. It already feels like it's gonna get lock stick. It's not strong lock stick right now. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily an issue yet, but I'm pretty sure that it will become an issue over years and years of use. And I've had that issue on titanium frame lock Spydercos without a lock bar insert before. So the Spyderco Chalkway was my favorite knife to carry for a long time and is still a favorite of mine. But unfortunately, this one developed major blades lock stick to the point that I had to like try all kinds of desperate measures. I sent it in to Spyderco. They said that they couldn't do anything to improve the quality of the knife or whatever. At that time, I could barely open it or unlock it without using a screwdriver 90% of the time, and the other 10% of the time I did have to use a screwdriver to get it to unlock because it was just galling and getting so much lock stick there. It's something that was really frustrating because I love the Chalkway and it's a great knife, but just a huge flaw in that it doesn't have that lock bar insert, and it made the knife basically unusable for like more than a year, definitely more than a year. I don't remember how long, but I was actually able to fix it myself for the most part, but it's a little bit of a janky fix in that I had to change the tension of the lock bar and stuff. So I really dislike that, that it doesn't have the lock bar insert, and it makes it so that I really just don't trust that it's going to not develop lock stick like the Chalkway did. I really wish that they had included a lock bar insert on this knife. And as some examples on the way this is, you can see on the Police 4, you can get completely at the thumb hole. Same deal on the Andorra. And then moving into some other designs that still work better, you can see that on the Domino, it is a little bit obscured, but much easier to get at. And same again on the Chalkway. But those two issues, the, again, slight but meaningful to me difficulty in getting at the spider hole, and then the lack of a lock bar insert, and the pretty much, in my opinion, surety of getting lock stick on this knife, make me just not willing to keep it. So it's not that those are issues, huge issues. The lock stick isn't, again, like I said, at the point. See, there it felt worse than the previous couple times I'd open it. And that's what happens. It gets worse the more you open it, kind of consecutively. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know if I'll return it or if I'll sell it. But either way, it's just not a knife that, to me, is going to work in the capacity that I wanted it to, and especially for the price, even though I did get it for a pretty good deal. So that's my thoughts on the Spyderco SpydieChef. I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't do a whole lot of negative reviews, but that's because I just like most knives. I probably, I guess, know if I'm gonna like a knife, or pretty much know if I'm gonna like a knife before I decide to spend the money on it. And I was just really hoping to like this one, and it didn't turn out that way. But if you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to my channel. I have lots of other videos like this, as well as, like I said, a video on the other knife design, one of the other knives designed by Marcin Schliech, the swayback. And hit the bell for notifications so you know when I post new videos. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, especially Instagram and Facebook, all at Knife Thoughts. And last but not least, don't forget to go out and do good.